The first thing I noticed was that the lights were already on. That didn't make any sense. I was standing in the driveway, my car still running, my hands frozen on the steering wheel, staring at the narrow yellow glow leaking through the front windows of the house. The listing said the place was empty. The owner had written that clearly. No one lives there anymore. Just come by, check the item, and leave the cash in the mailbox if you want it. But someone had turned the lights on, and I was absolutely certain I hadn't seen them on when I drove past this place 5 minutes earlier. For a moment, I just sat there, listening to the engine idle, feeling my pulse in my throat. The neighborhood was dead quiet, the kind of quiet you only get far outside the city, where even dogs don't bother barking anymore. Tall trees crowded both sides of the narrow road, their branches swaying slowly in the wind like they were whispering to each other. I told myself there was a simple explanation. Maybe a neighbor, maybe a timer, maybe I just hadn't noticed before. Still, I didn't like it. I checked my phone again. Even though I already knew what it would say, the messages were still there. The seller's name was Harold. His profile looked normal. Older guy. Said he was downsizing. Selling tools, old furniture, some garage equipment. The item I'd come for was a heavy-duty generator. The kind you keep for power outages. He was offering it for a price that was almost suspiciously low. When I asked why, he said he was moving in with his daughter and didn't want to haul it with him. Simple. Reasonable. Boring. That should have been my first clue. I'm in my late 50s, and I like to think I'm not stupid. I've bought and sold things online for years. I've learned how to spot scams, how to avoid sketchy meetups, how to trust my gut when something feels off. But sometimes your gut only starts screaming when you're already in the driveway. I shut off the engine and stepped out of the car. The air smelled like wet leaves and old wood. The house was a single-story place, small and narrow, with peeling paint and a sagging porch. One of the porch lights was on, flickering slightly, like it was struggling to stay awake. The front windows glowed softly, curtains half drawn. I stood there for a few seconds, debating. Then I reminded myself why I was here. We'd had 3 power outages that winter already. The last one lasted almost 2 days. I was tired of throwing out spoiled food and sitting in the dark listening to the wind. This generator was supposed to fix that problem. I walked up the porch steps. The wood creaked under my weight, loud in the quiet. I paused, listening. No movement, no voices, just the wind and the distant sound of something moving in the trees. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again, a little louder. Still nothing. That's when I noticed the front door wasn't fully closed. It was slightly open, maybe an inch or two, like someone had pulled it shut but hadn't bothered to make sure it latched. A cold, unpleasant feeling settled in my stomach. I pulled out my phone and checked the messages again. The last one from Harold said, "Won't be home. Generator is in the back room. Door will be unlocked. Please close it when you leave." I stood there, staring at that message, then at the door, then at the light spilling out from inside. "Get the generator and go," I muttered to myself. I pushed the door open. The hinges let out a long, tired groan. Inside, the house smelled old. Dust, maybe a little mildew. The living room was small and cluttered with covered furniture. White sheets draped over couches and chairs like ghosts trying to pretend they weren't there. A single lamp was on in the corner, casting long shadows across the walls. "Hello," I called out, even though I didn't expect an answer. My voice sounded wrong in there, too loud, like the house was listening. No reply. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. The lock clicked automatically, a sharp, final sound that made me pause and glance back at it. I don't know why that bothered me so much, but it did. I moved deeper into the house, following the narrow hallway toward the back. The floorboards creaked with every step. The walls were lined with old pictures, family photos, landscapes, things from decades ago. Most of them were crooked, like someone had bumped into them recently and never bothered to fix them. At the end of the hall was a doorway leading into what looked like a storage room or maybe a converted laundry room. And there it was, the generator. Big, heavy, exactly like the photos. Relief washed over me. For a second, I actually laughed at myself for being so tense. Then I noticed something else. The room had two doors. One led back into the hallway where I was standing. The other, on the opposite wall, led somewhere else. Another part of the house. Or maybe outside. That wasn't in the listing photos. I stepped closer, peering around the generator, and that's when I heard it. A soft sound. Not a footstep. Not a voice. Breathing. It was faint, slow, and steady, like someone was trying very hard to be quiet. I froze. The sound wasn't coming from behind me. It was coming from the other side of the room, from near that second door. My mouth went dry. "Hello," I said again, quieter this time. The breathing didn't stop. In fact, it felt like it got closer. Every instinct in my body told me to leave, to turn around, walk back down the hall, and get out of the house without asking any more questions. But I didn't. Instead, I stood there, listening, my heart pounding so hard I was sure whoever was in the room could hear it. Then the second door creaked open. Just a little. Enough for me to see the edge of a shadow slip across the wall. I backed up slowly, my heel bumping into the generator with a dull thud. The breathing stopped. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then a voice spoke. "Did you bring the money?" It was a man's voice. Older. Rough. Calm in a way that made my skin crawl. I thought the owner wasn't here," I said. There was a pause. Then the door opened wider. A man stepped into the room. He was tall and thin, wearing a dark jacket and a baseball cap pulled low over his face. I couldn't see his eyes clearly in the dim light, but I could see his mouth. He was smiling. "I am the owner," he said. "At least I am now." That's when I realized something was very, very wrong. I took a step back. "So," he continued, "did you bring the cash?" "I think there's been a misunderstanding," I said, my voice shaking despite my best effort to keep it steady. "I'll just leave." I turned toward the hallway. He moved faster than I expected. He didn't grab me. He didn't block me. He just closed the other door, the one behind him, and when it shut, I heard something click. A lock. My heart dropped into my stomach. "You can leave," he said calmly. "After we finish." "Finish what?" I asked. He tilted his head slightly, like he was considering the question. "After you help me with something in the back." I looked past him, toward the dark doorway he'd come through. Whatever was back there, I was certain I didn't want to see it. I took another step toward the hallway. His smile faded. "I wouldn't do that," he said, and that's when I noticed his right hand. He was holding something long and metallic, partially hidden behind his leg. I didn't wait to find out what it was. I turned and ran. I didn't think. I didn't plan. I just ran. My shoes slapped against the wooden floor as I tore down the hallway, the walls blurring in my peripheral vision. Behind me, I heard the man move. Fast, faster than someone his age should have. There was no shouting, no angry yelling, just the heavy sound of footsteps and the sharp scrape of something metallic hitting the wall. The front door was only a few steps away. I reached for it and yanked. It didn't open. For half a second, my brain refused to accept what my hands were telling it. I pulled again, harder, my shoulder slamming into the door. Locked. Of course it was locked. I spun around just as the man reached the end of the hallway. Up close, I could see more of him. His face was lined and pale, his eyes dark and strangely calm. Whatever he was holding was clearer now, too, a long screwdriver, the kind you'd use on heavy machinery, not furniture. "Easy," he said, like we were negotiating over a price. "You're going to hurt yourself." My heart was trying to break out of my chest. "There's been a mistake," I said, backing away from him, my hands up. "Take the generator. Take whatever you want. I'm leaving." He shook his head slowly. "That's not why you're here." He took a step toward me. I turned and ran again, this time toward the back of the house. The hallway opened into a narrow kitchen that smelled like old grease and damp wood. The overhead light flickered weakly, barely doing its job. I spotted the back door immediately, the one I'd noticed earlier, the one that looked like it barely hung on its hinges. I sprinted for it. Behind me, something crashed. A chair, maybe. Or a table. I didn't look back. I hit the back door and shoved. It opened, but not all the way. Something heavy was pressed against it from the other side. I shoved again, my shoulder screaming in protest, and felt it move an inch. Then another. Cold night air rushed in through the gap, carrying the smell of wet dirt and leaves. "Stop," the man said behind me. Not shouting, not angry, just certain. I pushed harder. That's when another voice spoke. Not his. "Don't." The word came from outside. My blood turned to ice. I froze, my hands still on the door, my body caught between two directions I didn't want to go. Slowly, I turned my head. Through the narrow opening, I could see part of the backyard. It was darker than the front. No porch light, no street light nearby. Just trees and shadows and the faint outline of a fence. And a person. Someone was standing just a few feet from the door. Taller than the man inside. Broader. Their face was completely in shadow, but I could tell they were looking straight at me. "Step away from the door," the voice outside said. Behind me, the first man laughed quietly. "There you are," he said. "I was wondering when you'd get here." My mind struggled to keep up. "How many of you are there?" I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. "Enough," the man behind me said. The one outside shifted slightly, and I saw something in their hands. I couldn't tell what it was, only that it was long and dark and definitely not something you use for fixing generators. I was trapped. Front door locked. Back door blocked. 2 men. Maybe more. For a split second, I thought about just dropping to the floor. About curling up and hoping they'd lose interest. About doing whatever they wanted and praying I'd still be alive at the end of it. Then something inside me snapped. I slammed the back door shut as hard as I could and spun around, charging straight at the man in the hallway. He didn't expect it. I crashed into him, my shoulder hitting his chest. We both stumbled, and the screwdriver clattered across the floor, skidding under the covered couch in the living room. He grabbed at me, his fingers digging into my jacket, but I twisted and shoved him away with everything I had. "Run!" he shouted toward the back door. I didn't wait to see who he was talking to. I sprinted for the living room, my lungs burning, my legs feeling like they were about to give out. The covered furniture loomed around me like pale, crouching shapes. I nearly tripped over a coffee table hidden under a sheet. The front door was right there. I hit it again, this time with my whole body. It didn't move. For a terrifying second, I thought I was done. Then I remembered the lock. The click I'd heard earlier. I threw myself at the door handle and yanked down with both hands. It opened. I burst out onto the porch, stumbled down the steps, and ran for my car like my life depended on it. Because it did. I could hear them behind me now. More than one set of footsteps. Heavy. Fast. I fumbled with my keys, dropped them, nearly screamed, then snatched them up and jammed them into the door lock. I threw myself into the driver's seat and slammed the door just as something hit the side of the car. The engine roared to life. I didn't look back. I didn't care what I hit or scraped or ran over. I just drove. I didn't stop until I was back on a main road, surrounded by streetlights and other cars, and people who had no idea how close I'd come to disappearing into a house that wasn't empty. The police came later. Of course they did. They went back to the address with me. The house was dark. Empty. No generator. No covered furniture. No signs of anyone living there. The back door was gone, though. Not broken. Gone. Like it had never existed. The front door lock was new. Brand new. They told me maybe I'd gone to the wrong house. Maybe I'd panicked. Maybe I'd imagined parts of it. I know what I saw. I know there was more than one of them. And I know that listing was never about selling a generator. A week later, I checked the site again. The same account was still there. Different item. Different address. Same kind of price that made you think you were getting a deal. I reported it. The next day, it was gone. 2 days after that, a new one appeared. Different name. Same writing style. Same promise. Easy pickup. No one home. I don't buy things from strangers anymore. And every time I drive past a house with the lights on when no one is supposed to be there, I think about what might still be happening in places nobody checks. And how close I came to becoming something no one would ever find. The police kept asking me the same question. Are you sure someone else wasn't in the car? I told them no. I was sure. Because when I opened the driver's door, the seat was still warm. Not just a little warm. Not maybe the sun hit it through the window warm. It felt like someone had just stood up and stepped away. And the engine was off. The keys were still in my hand. This happened 2 years ago. On a Tuesday I remember way too clearly. I'm 61. Retired from a job that kept me behind a desk for most of my life. When I finally stopped working, I told myself I'd simplify things. Fewer bills, fewer problems, fewer things to worry about breaking at the worst possible time. That included my car. I had an old sedan that had been good to me for over a decade, but it was starting to show its age. The transmission slipped sometimes. The heater only worked when it felt like it. And the last time it stalled in traffic, I decided I was done tempting fate. So I did what a lot of people my age do now. I went online. I wasn't looking for anything fancy, just something reliable. Something I could pay for in cash and not think about every time I turned the key. I spent a couple of weeks browsing listings, mostly on local sites. Dealerships were overpriced. Private sellers were hit or miss. Then I found it. A silver SUV. Not new, but well-maintained. Low mileage for its age. The price was fair, almost suspiciously fair, but not so low that it screamed scam. The seller's name was Martin. His messages were polite. Normal. He said he was selling it because his wife could no longer drive and they didn't need 2 vehicles anymore. He sent extra photos when I asked. Even a short video of the engine running. Everything checked out. We agreed to meet on a Saturday morning in the parking lot of a closed hardware store on the edge of town. Public place. Daylight. Cameras, probably. I told my daughter where I was going, just in case. She teased me for being paranoid, but she didn't argue. The morning of the meeting, I drove out there early. The parking lot was mostly empty, which wasn't surprising. The store had closed months ago. A few weeds poked through the cracks in the asphalt. There was one other car parked near the far end, but it looked abandoned, like it had been sitting there for a while. I parked near the front, where the building's big glass windows reflected the gray sky. At exactly 10 o'clock, my phone buzzed. Here. Silver SUV. Toward the back. I looked up. Sure enough, I saw it. Parked closer to the tree line behind the store. The silver SUV from the photos. I drove over and parked a few spaces away. The first thing I noticed was that no one was standing next to it. I waited. A minute passed. Then 2. I sent a text. I'm here. The reply came almost immediately. In the car. Come take a look. That should have been my second clue. The first was the way the SUV was positioned. Backed into the space, nose facing out, like it was ready to leave in a hurry. I got out of my car and walked over. The windows were tinted, darker than I expected. I couldn't see inside clearly, but I could make out a vague shape in the driver's seat. I knocked lightly on the window. No response. I knocked again, harder. Still nothing. For a moment I wondered if I had the wrong car. Then my phone buzzed again. Doors unlocked. I hesitated. I thought you said you were in there. I texted back. 3 dots appeared. Then disappeared. Then my phone buzzed again. I am. Just tired. Come in. It's easier to talk. I stood there, staring at the screen, feeling that familiar, uncomfortable tightening in my chest. I don't like sitting in other people's cars. Never have. Especially not with someone I don't know. But I also didn't want to seem rude or paranoid, so I reached for the handle. The door opened. The driver's seat was empty. The inside of the car smelled faintly of coffee and something sweet, like air freshener. The dashboard lights were off. The engine was off. The keys were not in the ignition, but the seat was warm. Warm like someone had just been sitting there. I stepped back, my heart starting to race. Hello, I said, feeling ridiculous talking to an empty car. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Sorry. Had to step away for a second. Check the mileage. It's all there. I looked around the parking lot. Still empty. I texted back. Where did you go? No reply. I waited. Another minute. Then my phone buzzed again. Behind you. I turned. There was no one there. Just the tree line, the empty lot, the old building. A cold feeling slid down my spine. I typed, "I don't see you." This time, the reply took longer. When it came, it was short. Good. That's when I heard a sound. A soft click. Not from my phone. From inside the SUV. I froze. Slowly, I leaned forward and looked through the open driver's door. The glove compartment was open. I was certain it had been closed a second ago. Inside it, I saw something dark and metallic. I didn't wait to get a better look. I backed away from the car, my pulse hammering in my ears. My phone buzzed again. Relax. You're safe. For now. I turned in a slow circle, scanning the lot, the building, the trees. Where are you? I said out loud, my voice shaking. My phone buzzed. Close enough. That's when I noticed the reflection in the store's glass. Not of me, of someone standing behind my car. Tall, thin, wearing something dark. I spun around. There was nothing there. But when I looked back at the glass, the reflection was still there. Closer. My phone buzzed again. You shouldn't have come alone. I ran. I didn't care how stupid I looked. I ran back to my car, yanked the door open, and threw myself inside. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped the keys twice before I got them into the ignition. As I started the engine, something hit the trunk. Hard. The car rocked. I didn't look back. I floored it and tore out of that parking lot, tires screaming as I turned onto the road. I drove straight to the police station. They went back with me. The SUV was gone. No silver car. No signs of anything being there. They asked to see the messages. The number didn't exist anymore. Just like that. They told me it was probably a prank. Or someone trying to scare me. Or someone who changed their mind about selling and decided to mess with me instead. They didn't have an answer for the warm seat. Neither do I. A month later, I saw the same SUV. Different listing. Different name. Same photos. Same price. I didn't click on it. But sometimes, when I get into my own car after it's been sitting for a while, I still check the seat before I sit down. Just in case it's warm. The voicemail was only 7 seconds long. No heavy breathing. No background noise. No obvious threat. Just a man's calm voice saying my name. Perfectly. First and last. Then the line went dead. I listened to it 3 times before I realized my hands were shaking. I'm 64 years old. I've lived in the same town for nearly 20 years. I don't have enemies. I don't have a dramatic life. Most days, the most exciting thing that happens to me is deciding whether I want soup or a sandwich for lunch. So when someone who wasn't in my contacts said my name like that, like they were standing in the room with me, it didn't feel like a prank. Felt like a warning. This all started because I was trying to sell my old grandfather clock. It had belonged to my parents and before that to my grandparents. It was beautiful, but it was also huge, and after my wife passed, I moved into a smaller place. There just wasn't room for it anymore. I didn't want to deal with shipping or antique dealers taking a big cut, so I did what I'd done a dozen times before. I listed it online. Local pickup only. Cash only. Meet at my place because there was no way I was moving that thing by myself. I got a few messages. Some lowball offers. Some people who stopped replying halfway through the conversation. Then I got one from someone named Evan. Polite. Direct. Said he collected old clocks and had been looking for one like mine for a while. He didn't try to negotiate the price. Didn't ask 100 questions. Just asked when he could come see it. We agreed on a Saturday afternoon. The night before, I got the voicemail. 7 seconds. My name. Nothing else. I told myself it was probably nothing. Wrong number. Some kind of robocall glitch. A prank. Still, I slept with the lights on. The next day, I almost canceled. I stood in my kitchen, staring at my phone, feeling that same tightness in my chest I'd felt when I listened to that message. But I didn't want to be the kind of person who let nerves run his life. And I didn't want to start seeing danger in every shadow. So I didn't cancel. At exactly 2 o'clock, a car pulled up in front of my house. Not in the driveway. On the street. That was odd. Most people used the driveway. I watched from the living room window as a dark sedan sat there, engine running. A man got out, looked at my house for a few seconds, then got back in. He didn't come to the door. He just drove away. I told myself he'd gotten the wrong address. 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Running late. Be there soon. That message was from Evan. My stomach tightened. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. At 2:32, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find a man in his late 30s or early 40s. Neatly dressed. Clean-shaven. Friendly smile. He held his phone up slightly, like he wanted to show me something if I asked. Sorry about that, he said. Traffic. That's fine, I replied, even though there was no traffic on my street. You must be Evan. He smiled wider. Yes, sir. His voice was normal, pleasant. Nothing like the one on the voicemail. I let him in. The clock stood in the corner of the living room, tall and dark and polished. He walked around it slowly, examining it like he knew what he was looking at. He asked the right questions, complimented the craftsmanship, said it was in better condition than he expected. Everything about the interaction felt normal, too normal. So, he said finally, does it still work? Yes, I said. Keeps perfect time. Mind if I hear it? I reached over and opened the glass panel so he could hear the ticking. The steady, rhythmic sound filled the room. He nodded, satisfied. I'll take it, he said. If you don't mind, I just need to make a quick call to have someone help me load it. It's heavier than I expected. That's fine, I said. You can use the phone if you want. He shook his head. I'll step outside. Won't take a minute. He went out the front door, and I watched him through the window as he stood on the porch, phone to his ear. He wasn't talking. He was listening. After about 30 seconds, he nodded once and hung up. Then he didn't come back inside. Instead, he walked down the porch steps and around the side of my house. I waited. A minute passed. Then 2. I walked to the front door and opened it. He wasn't on the porch. I looked down the street. The dark sedan was back, parked farther down this time, near the corner. Its engine was still running. Evan, I called out, feeling foolish. No answer. I closed the door and went back into the living room. That's when I heard the clock stop. The ticking just cut off. The sudden silence felt wrong, heavy. I turned toward it. The second hand was frozen in place. I frowned. That had never happened before. I stepped closer. That's when I saw the note. It was tucked behind the glass panel. A small piece of folded paper I was certain hadn't been there before. My heart started to race as I pulled it out and unfolded it. It had only 3 words written on it. We know you. I stood there, staring at the note, my mouth dry. Then my phone buzzed. A new voicemail. I didn't listen to it. I didn't need to. I already knew what it would say. My name. From somewhere inside my house, I heard a sound. A soft creak, like a floorboard shifting under someone's weight. I turned slowly, scanning the hallway. Hello, I called out. No answer. Another creak. Closer. I backed away, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I'm calling the police, I said, even though my voice came out weak. The creaking stopped. For a few seconds, everything was quiet. Then a voice spoke. Not from the hallway. From behind me. Don't do that. I spun around. The man was standing near the front door. Not Evan. This one was taller, broader. His face was calm in a way that didn't make any sense. How did you get in? I asked. He smiled slightly. You invited us. Before I could react, something hit me from behind. My vision exploded into white light. I don't know how long I was out. When I came to, I was on the living room floor. My head was pounding. My mouth tasted like metal. The clock was gone. So was the note. So were both men. The front door was wide open. I called the police. They came. They looked around. They asked questions. There were no signs of forced entry. No missing valuables. Just one thing gone. The clock. They told me maybe it was a robbery. Maybe I'd been hit by one of the men and confused the rest. They couldn't explain how someone got behind me without me hearing them. They couldn't explain the note because the note wasn't there anymore. They couldn't explain the voicemail either, because when they tried to play it, it was gone. Deleted. I changed my locks that week. I installed cameras. I stopped selling things online. 3 months later, I saw my clock. Not in a store. Not in a collector's listing. In the background of a photo. Someone had posted a picture of their living room in a local group. Just a normal, boring photo. But in the corner, behind their couch, I saw it. The same scratches on the wood. The same small crack in the glass panel. My clock. The post was taken down before I could message them. The account disappeared the next day. Sometimes late at night, when my house is quiet, I still think I hear a ticking sound. And I wonder if it's really just my imagination. Or if somewhere, someone is keeping time with something that used to belong to me, and now knows exactly where I live.